Welcome to the Vora Method Homeschooling Guide. This is the first video and we're going to talk about just your basic questions that are going to help you get started with homeschooling. If you're just thinking about homeschooling, this video is going to help answer some of the questions that are probably on your mind. I want to start by talking about a situation that comes up not in homeschooling, but in regular schools, and in private schools and public schools both. A student comes home, and let's say they've been in school for a few weeks now. Let's say it's early September, October, and they tell their parent that they're not really getting anything out of their math class. Their math teacher isn't good. They don't like their math teacher. They're not learning anything from their math teacher. And what the parents say is, well, just stick with this teacher for this year, and then, hopefully next year you're going to have a better one. Maybe not. You might have a bad one next year too, but let's just stick with this teacher for this year, and then we'll go from there. That is insane. You would never expect an adult to put up with that. I mean, you would never imagine an adult going to a restaurant that treated them poorly, abused them, gave them bad food. You wouldn't say, like, yeah, just keep going to that same restaurant for a year, and then next year go to a different one. Absolutely not. You'd go there once, as an adult, you would go there once and never again. And that's what free market education is. These are some of the principles that are really going to shape how homeschooling works. The question that I get from a lot of parents is, do I have to know every subject? Do I have to be able to teach everything? Do I have to know chemistry and economics and physics and math and algebra and all the other, and trigonometry? And people get worried because sometimes you just don't remember that stuff, and maybe you were just never that good at it in the first place. A couple things. First, it's easier the second time around. When you look at that stuff that used to give you a heart attack when you were a kid, it'll be easier now. But the second thing is as a homeschooling parent, you don't necessarily have to fill the role of 12 teachers. You're really more filling the role of a principal. In other words, you're there making the big decisions. You don't necessarily have to teach chemistry. You have to find some kind of a resource. It can be a free resource, paid resource, whatever you want, that's going to help teach chemistry. And if you find that something that you're doing isn't working for one kid, maybe it worked for one kid and it didn't work for another kid. If you're finding something that isn't working, then your job is to find something else, to try something different. And that's an important mindset. That's the mindset that differentiates the homeschooling, the free market education approach from going to either a private school or a public school, because you don't have that option in a private or public school. You can't just change your teacher if you don't like the teacher. Maybe if you are a major donor to a private school, you might have some pull, but probably not a lot of pull. And if it's that you just don't like the textbook, chances are all the teachers that year are using that textbook and you're stuck with it. As a homeschooling parent, you have that ability to make decisions. And so your job isn't necessarily to say, I'm going to teach you all of chemistry because I'm also a chemist and a physicist and an economist and everything. No. You might say, all right, let's try Khan Academy. Let's try Crash Course. Let's try some of this stuff on the Vora Method Homeschooling Guide. Let's try whatever and see what works. And you try something for a bit, and if it turns out to not work, you try something else. That's the key thing here. Your job is to make sure that the goals are achieved, but you don't necessarily individually have to be able to private tutor your kids on every single subject. Listen, I tutor on more subjects than almost anyone. But there's still some subjects I just don't teach. I don't teach French. I don't know French. So if somebody wants to know French, I can point them to resources that I know will work. But I don't necessarily provide the teaching myself. And you don't need to provide the teaching for every single subject at all. You just need to not do what public and private school parents do. You just need to not say stupid things like, yeah, this is a bad math teacher. Stick with it for an entire year of wasting your time, building gaps in your foundation, learning to hate math. Just do that for a full year, and then next year we'll hopefully do something different. Just don't be that dumb, and you're going to be basically already a major step ahead. So it's about, your job is more decision making and helping your child learn that kind of intelligent decision making. It's not necessarily to provide everything yourself. Now, the second question is how do you make sure that if you're homeschooling using free market education and all that, how do you make sure that your child achieves a high level of academic dominance? And that can be tricky. And here's the general advice that I want to give here. And we're going to get into it in much more detail later on. Here's the general advice that I want to give here. Some things are going to matter a lot. In math, those things are going to be multiplication tables, fractions, and factoring. They matter more than everything else combined. So you need to really make sure, one way or another, either you can be, if you're the one who's providing direct tutoring, great, or using other books, videos, whatever you want, you need to make sure that that skill is developed. Don't move on past it until it is developed. Make sure that your child knows that that these things matter more than all the other things. So don't dilute your teaching, your decision making with nonsense. There are going to be certain things that will lead to success. Those should be the focal point. About 5% of things should be getting 95% of your focus and attention. Making sure that your kid knows how to do fractions, that's going to matter much, much, much more than whether or not he can identify different types of fish. Because A, no one cares if you can identify different types of fish, and B, if you can be dominant in math, you're also going to be dominant in science, and you can take all the time in the world later on to learn about fish. So really make sure, even within math, certain things just don't matter in math. Stem and leaf plots, they don't matter. Don't waste a single second on it. The decision making that you do is going to be important. Now you might say, well, I don't know what decision making to do. Ask. You have various consultants. You can ask us. We have a lot of videos on these topics. We also offer private consultations on basically everything. You can ask your friends who are experts in the area. If you have a friend who's a great chemist, just ask. Ask what are the things that are truly important. Don't ask what are all the things you know, because they might know 50,000 things. Just what are the most important 3 things. Academic dominance comes from a mastery of a very small number of things. And this is what private and public schools don't get, because they waste all year going from one unimportant topic to the next one, and sort of buried in there here are going to be like the 2 things that actually matter. And sometimes kids happen to not know those 2 things, and they end up hating science or math or history or whatever. Just make sure you're learning those. Make sure you're driving that point home on those important things. We're going to talk about more of these techniques and whatnot in these upcoming videos. But if you can manage to not say anything as sheerly stupid, if you can manage to not saying anything as absurd, if you can manage to not saying anything as straight dumb as, yeah, this is a bad math teacher, but just stick with this teacher for an entire year, like a nincompoop, if you can manage to not say that, you're already miles ahead of any private schooling parent, any public schooling parent. And believe me, we work with kids from the best private and public schools in the world. We have kids from TJ and Stuyvesant. We have kids from Exeter and Andover. We have kids from La Rosie. It doesn't matter how big or famous or expensive the school is, they all have this same problem, which is that if something doesn't work, they stick with it for an entire year, like the just dumbest person on earth. Don't do that, and you're already going to be a mile ahead. Your job is to make decisions, and we're going to show you how to do that in a lot of the upcoming videos, at the various the upcoming literature, tools, and other recommendations that we'll have in this series.